specific products that are produced in South Africa and exported to the United States. But industry bodies have raised a lot of concern, especially from the local automotive industry. Tonight, joined by a good guest who joins us on the show this evening after quite a while, Renai Moothilal, Executive Director for the National Association of Automotive Component and Allied Manufacturers. He's the Executive Director there at Naacam. Such a pleasure to speak to you, Renai.
Evening to you and your listeners. Google Letu, thanks for having me again.
Always a delight to speak to you. The last time we touched base, we really spoke about the significant level of investment that's been made by the member organizations of Naacam, the ongoing commitment as well to invest in the component, automotive component manufacturers in South Africa. And there's been amazing growth that we've seen. So I think firstly, it's important for us to reflect on just the competitiveness and the heightened level of investment that we do see from the automotive component parts in South Africa, and how this does translate into our trade relations. But maybe give us a refresher in terms of the work that your members do in the country.
Yeah, look, I mean, thanks for picking that up as a focus area. I think you're absolutely right. South Africa's got a very vibrant and long history of automotive manufacturing in our country. In fact, this year is, I think, a 100-year celebration of having a fairly large and diverse automotive producing environment. And I think the component manufacturers are really the kind of deep filling in the pie of this particular sector. Given the depth of value addition, the depth of investment, employment, new business opportunities that all sit within, let's call it, the component manufacturing value chain. I mean, we were talking about investments just last year alone, just on auto components, more than 4 billion rand worth of high quality investment, which on its own results in significant technology transfer, skills development. So I think, without sounding like too much of an advocate for my sector, I do think from a manufacturing perspective, component production in South Africa is an absolutely key makeup of our industry.
And very important because it also speaks to our competitiveness when it comes to the goods and services we can export, right? And this is where AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act with the United States, comes into play. Help us contextualize how the automotive sector has been benefiting from AGOA being in place, and why it is that you are hoping that the DTIC continues to lobby for its progress and sustainability.
Look, I think first up we need to understand that South Africa alone as a consumer market for automotive production is probably not sufficient to maintain and grow levels of vehicle production. So key export markets are kind of absolutely crucial. And traditional markets like the EU and the US have anchored on the strong trade relationships that are in place. I mean, with the EU, for example, the free trade agreement, and then, of course, AGOA from the North American perspective. I mean, just to put it into context, between 2001 and current times, there's been close on a 500% increase on exports of automotive product out of South Africa into the US market. And that's across a range of not only fully assembled vehicles, but of course, various different type of direct component exports. Just last year alone, I think component exports into the U.S. market was just close on 8 billion, 7.8 billion rand, making up about 15% of total component exports globally. So yeah, the U.S. is a key market. We are fully behind the South African government efforts to ensure not only that AGOA continues, but South Africa's participation within AGOA is secured. And then, of course, that is absolutely crucial to maintain an overall positive production environment. The reality is, if you start losing a major market like the US, you then have a domino effect on competitiveness overall, because this is a sector that relies heavily on the scale that comes out of volume production.
Have we been able to run the metrics there, just in terms of understanding what the worst case scenario is should AGOA not be extended?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to isolate an individual and say that if you have no AGOA, then this percentage of the sector will go, because like I said, it's a fully kind of globally integrated sector, and as you start losing a key market that, like I said, was worth 15% of total manufactured exports, it will have an impact. The key export vehicles that are going into the U.S., you can expect that the supplier bases linked to those vehicle exports will be the hardest hit. But I mean, if you want to put a number to it, the total component improvement in South Africa well in excess of 80,000, and over time you can expect that pretty much all of those jobs can be at risk as you start eroding into the overall competitiveness metric behind producing components in South Africa.
Renai, before I let you go, the last time we did touch base, it was way before we saw these heightened levels of inflation. Load shedding was quite affected, but it's cooled down now. And of course, politically, we're still quite away from the elections, where we do see that things have stabilized now, and the government of national unity has certainly come to the fore, or at least attempting to, from what we can tell. I'm keen to understand, just in terms of business as usual, or perhaps a business update from the automotive space and components parts. I'm keen to get your views on the prospects over the next 6 months, what the next 6 months to a year might look like for your industry, taking into account AGOA, but also just looking at the fundamentals in terms of the macroeconomic environment.
Yeah, sure. And I think the next 6 months to a year will continue to be challenging. The year to date, from a production perspective, has not been what was initially projected in terms of volumes to be produced. There have been volume reductions. I mean, you're obviously fully aware of the notice by Mercedes-Benz in East London that they were looking to reduce a shift in line with reduced volumes. Big exporters into the EU also not realizing to date what were initial projections for the year. So from a volume perspective, it is currently slightly precarious. I think some of the issues that you raised around energy supply, logistics, I mean, the load shedding is obviously stabilized, but I don't think it is a factor that people are not continuously thinking about and having plans in place to ensure that there is mitigation should it start escalating again. Logistics definitely one that needs to be continuously sharpened in terms of our focus. There are still ongoing kind of sporadic stoppages in logistics and inward and outward port movements and the like. So, yeah, there are factors that are not making it the easiest in terms of trading conditions. But overall, I think, like you mentioned, the installation of the seventh administration, from an auto sector perspective, we would look to see a continuation of the focus on industrial policy under the SA Autos Master Plan, which has long been announced, a level of continuity in that policy implementation, building on, for example, things that came in the NEV white paper at the end of last year. Those are all positives that we should look to leverage on,
yes,
and then quickly deal with some of the structural issues.
Fantastic. Renai, always such a pleasure speaking to you, sir, and really getting a better understanding of the importance of the automotive and components allied manufacturers. Really important role that we play in making sure that, yes, the vehicle might start and move, but it's also made up of components to make sure that it's functional and able to actually move. So thank you again for giving us clarity, sir.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. That's Renai Moothilal, who's the Executive Director at the National Association of Automotive Component and Allied Manufacturers, known as Naacam. He's the executive director there. It is officially 6 minutes after 7 o'clock. We want to hear from you. You've been incredibly quiet after the long weekend, and we're hoping that we want to hear some of your thoughts just on the conversations we've had when it comes to trade in South Africa. As you heard, we touch base on the agricultural space, how that's also translating into the automotive space, but also in terms of the export of beef and the ban that's been in place just for the last 10 years at around the EU. And one thing that Wandile has made very clear is that South Africa has the fortunate opportunity to really be at liberty to trade with global partners, whether it be the United States, our peers here across Southern Africa through SACU, our peers who happen to be in the EU, China and BRICS nations in the East, and not forgetting the Middle East itself through the likes of Abu Dhabi and many other markets there, Saudi Arabia. The opportunities are present, but we need to find sustainable models that actually fit into the growth that we're looking to see there. But share your thoughts with us. 063-688-0959. We're also happy to take your calls on 086-0000-959. And you might want to join us in conversation just after 7:20.